So at this point, you may have already been doing some toe circles and toe alphabet. These are things like just while you're sitting, just simply working your ankle through full range of motion, just doing toe circles. Toe alphabet is where you just think about drawing circles and alphabet letters in the air with your toe, so A, B, C, so on and so forth. If you haven't started doing those because your ankle's been too stiff, after 2 or 3 days time, this is a pretty good time to start looking at those things. Something else you may want to start doing is something we call ankle rocking. And essentially what ankle rocking is, you can do it in a number of different positions. I really like to do it in something we call half kneeling, which is with one leg up and one leg down, like this. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to keep your heel down on the ground, and you just really want to push your knee forward over your toe while keeping your heel down on the floor. Once you've found the furthest point at which you can do that, so you'll see that's it for me. By the time I get to here, if I continue to move forward, my heel will start coming up off the floor, and that's something you want to avoid. So you step in just slightly until you find that furthest point, and then you just pulse there, and that's the rocking part. So that's ankle rocking. What can also help is to use your thumb just to palpate your lateral malleolus, or the outside of your ankle, and draw that back as you drive forward. I won't get into the technical reasons why that can help, but this can be a useful tool as well for ankle rocking. And then you pulse there. The more you do that, the better, really, as long as it doesn't impact your swelling or your pain. You want to make sure on a scale of 1 to 10 that your pain as you're doing these types of things is never more than a 3 or 4. It may be slightly symptomatic to do, but not so much that it's really increasing your swelling or pain for any kind of extended period of time. Another really good drill to increase range of motion in your ankles at this point is just low kneeling with pointed toes. So if you just sit back onto your butt like this and continue to stretch out your ankles that way, effectively what we're doing is we're increasing dorsiflexion, which is coming that way with ankle rocking, and then plantarflexion, which is coming back that way. And restoring high levels of mobility in your ankles is really the first step in protecting against that future occurrence of injury. So I'm here with performance coach Marsh. At this point you will have done 2 or 3 days of low nailing, ankle rocking, toe circles, all of those things in the early stages, just to increase your general mobility at your ankle joint. And now we really want to start paying a little bit more attention to those areas that can be quite often inhibited by ankle injuries. For example, the lateral hip musculature is prone to being switched off following an ankle injury, and that can lead to increased occurrence of knee injuries. So we want to guard against that in our rehab protocol. So beyond just focusing on rehabbing the ankle and restoring mobility and stability at that joint, we also need to look further up the kinetic chain and make sure that we're taking care of other joints as well that can be impacted by ankle injuries. Before we get into that, just very briefly, we're going to cover off some foam rolling techniques, which I'm going to have Marshall show us here. You can really roll the entire ankle. You may also want to spend a bit of time with your shoe off, really focusing on rolling the sole of your foot. One of the real problem areas when you sprain or rupture ligaments on the outside of your ankle is that the muscles that run up the side of your lower leg, your peroneals, they get very, very tight because they have to take on much of the stabilizing role of the ligaments that are no longer in place. So these muscles become incredibly tight. It can pay to spend some time rolling them out and doing some soft tissue work there. So Marshall, if you can just show us how you'd roll your peroneals. Yep, getting right over. You can see how Marshall's kind of turned his toe out and using that kind of facet to get onto the outside. A few times back and forth. As per usual with foam rolling, you want to spend a little bit extra time on those areas that are particularly sensitive, or any areas of extra tension. A few minutes a day on both sides is going to make a huge difference to the tissue quality on those muscles and their ability to manage the increased workload they now experience. Cool, so that's foam rolling of the peroneals. Another great exercise or soft tissue strategy for dealing with an ankle injury is taking something like this tool, just a massage rod, or even just your hands, and showing some love to the muscles that run just along the outside of your shin, namely your anterior tibialis, and as well as the muscles that run down the side of your leg, called your peroneals. It pays just to spend a few minutes, just like when you're foam rolling, just cranking up and down that outside portion, traveling forward onto that muscle that runs just alongside your shin as well, and spending some time on those. You can also, while you're at it, get in behind onto the calf as well, the gastroc and the soleus, finding the knots and spending extra time on those. If you don't have a tool like this, just using your hands, and sometimes that can be even more effective, just running down alongside the muscle. Another really important part, like we just said, is making sure that the lateral hip musculature also stays switched on and active when we need it to be. So Marshall's just going to demonstrate for us something called a clamshell. Essentially, you're going to hop down on your side, stack your feet and your knees up, something like this. You really want your feet in line with your torso, and then you're just going to drive that knee up and off, working on sort of externally rotating and abducting of this outside hip here, and working on getting that good glute activation through that exercise. 10 or 15 of these a few times a day really works wonders for keeping those muscles active and switched on like they should be. Cool, and you'd switch over, you'd do that both sides. Beyond that, we can start looking at ways to reintegrate balance components and keeping the muscles of the foot and ankle working in conjunction to help with your balance. This also, again, helps with that stability component through the lateral hip. So I'm just going to have Marshall just demonstrate. There's not much to this, right? But the idea is just to stay balanced here. We can start adding in some more dynamic movements, like coming up into a knee drive and holding that position and bringing it back down. Marshall, if you just show us an SLDL or a single leg deadlift. Some of these things are progressions that over the course of the next week or two, as you find that your balance is improving, you can start adding in as well. Another thing that really helps there is trying any of these things with your eyes closed. You just want to make sure that's a fairly advanced progression. Another great exercise for switching on that lateral hip or the glute complex on the outside of your hips is a shuffle, just a lateral shuffle. So Marshall's just going to demonstrate it here. A couple of key things with this: you want to make sure that you're not leaning to either side with your torso, stay nice and tall, nice and straight up and down, and he's really keeping his knees out in line with his toes as well, not letting his knees collapse in as he shuffles along. That's great, and that's just another really good way to switch on the glutes, which as we said earlier, have a tendency to become inhibited following an ankle injury.